Can you hear me okay? Somebody asked me what I was doing today, and I said I was going to talk about Buddhist extremists, and 3 people laughed at me. We're not really known as card-carrying extremists, but I reminded all 3 of my friends that they had a pretty highly idealized view of Buddhists. Now, when anybody asks me to talk about anything, particularly, let's say, extremism, I'd say, well, I know an extremist Buddhist really well, Tony Stultz. You know, I think that from our tradition, there's a saying by the Buddha that if we could somehow have omniscience and we understood everything and everyone, we would forgive everything and everything. And another one I like is that I am a foolish being embraced by boundless compassion. So we kind of start out from this place that extremism, as my friends have so well said, is born in delusion or ignorance. But I think more than anything, extremism in myself is born out of hurt. When I perceive that someone is judging me in a certain way, or I perceive that a group is hurting me, I immediately go on the defensive. And it's pretty easy for that defensive to move from just self-protection, which, you know, we all observe, to attacking the other and seeing the other as totally different than myself. So in our practice, it would be starting with the individual. We're pretty psychological. Our theology is pretty much psychology. So we start with the idea that you have to, first of all, accept everything about yourself and develop some sense of an unconditional self-acceptance. Then you must learn to develop an unconditional acceptance of the other. And then the third part is to realize that most of the time our extremism is a general human response to how the world is just not fair. And it hurts. And so somehow we want to make that right. And so we hide ourselves behind our philosophical or our political ideologies as a way to try to remedy that. Buddhism makes a lot of those things. And so we start with ourselves. And the other thing is that I would say that any time in history when you look at our tradition and how it became mixed in with extremism, it was easy. It was when it became involved with politics. It's very simple. Whether you're talking about Southeast Asia, or you're talking about Northern Asia, anytime any Buddhists have gotten involved in extremism, which we have, it's because we began to mix religion in the government. I'm a big believer, I kind of echo the Dalai Lama, that we need to move away from this idea of government having anything to do with religion. And that doesn't mean people of religious faith can't inform their government or can't inspire their government. But the idea that a religion would have that kind of, almost feudal power over us, something that I think we need to move away from, and would be a great start. But as far as extremism in terms of the other, tomorrow I have the honor of being among a few clergy that are interring the ashes of the victims of the plane that crashed in 9/11 in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And the most difficult thing about planning for this was the fact that these remains are a mixture of the victims and also of the men who brought the plane down. So how do we do this? Because, essentially we're there to remember the victims. But for me, 9/11 is more a practice of reconciliation. And so even for those men, even though I was outvoted and they decided not to mention them, I will mention them. Not because I agreed with what they did, not because I agreed with their extremism, but simply because I know they're me. And I'll leave you one last thought. There's a prominent Buddhist teacher by the name of Thich Nhat Hanh who wrote a poem called Know Me by My True Name. And in that poem, he talks about the rape and murder by a pirate of a young girl. And in that poem, he reminds us that I am both the victim and the criminal. So I hope that was helpful.
Thank you.